when I'm doing a show that I find objectionable, I have to put on my professional hat and figure out like, this is my job. I'm not here to judge the show. I'm here to deliver
Yeah.
this as best as I can. That's the same no matter what the show is, whether I'm doing a preschool show or a Spanish language show or a show that I find reprehensible or this. And but when I go do a show that I love, like Picard or Evil or Snowpiercer or From Dusk Till Dawn, those shows where I'm like, ooh, I love this. It makes it work because now I'm not just putting on my professional hat, but I am coming in as a fan. And so for me, it's exciting to be like, oh my God, I'm part of this show that I'm contributing a small part to the show. And it's just like, and you're more deeply invested, I suppose.
Yeah. So you're a filmmaker. You've been in Hollywood. You're no longer in Hollywood. You're in South
Mhm.
Florida. So a lot of people have made moves out of LA to a bunch of different places. So for you, what was the impetus to do that? And then what's been the benefits and maybe the drawbacks of abandoning
Well,
LA for somewhere else?
I could see the glory. The so I gosh okay, so when I moved to Los Angeles in 1992, Hollywood was something very romantic for me. It had been something far away, maybe even slightly out of reach. But I was one of those that had been wanting to make movies since I was a kid. I made Super 8 movies here in South Florida, not where I am now, but where I grew up. And so from a very young age, I made the decision I was going to move to Hollywood and I was going to become a director. Like I was 12. And so I knew that that day would come, and that day did come in the early 90s. And I packed it up, $200 in my pocket. And the first several years that I was in Los Angeles, everything was marvelous. Everything was amazing. I would round, bends, and I would see something that like, oh, they shot something here, and I would remember, or coming over the 405 into the valley, and at night, especially, and seeing it all laid out in front of you was just gorgeous. And the history of Hollywood and all of Los Angeles, everywhere you look, there was just so much history. And and again, this is just my experience. About the 10-year mark, the sort of the romanticism starts to fade. And I think this typically happens to most people in this industry. And it sort of loses its sheen a little bit, right? Where you now are like, it's just a place where I work, and now a place where I live. And so when you move to Los Angeles at least for me, at a very young age, not married, don't have kids, anything like that, it it's sort of open and possible. And then as soon as you start to settle down and you start to start a family and you start to do all that, you start realizing it's not Oz. It's a company town. It's a
Yeah.
place where people live and people work. And we all kind of work in the same industry by and large. Obviously Los Angeles is a huge city. There's more than one industry, but you go to any coffee shop or any, usually you're going to hear someone talking about a script or talking about a thing, or they're talking about a movie, or they're talking about whatever. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just a thing that's very unique to Los Angeles. You see celebrities at the gas station pumping gas, because it's just you're reminded that, oh, this is where they live too. So, but
You have to remind yourself when you see someone you recognize, it does not mean you went to high school with them.
correct, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like at Ralph, you'll see like just they're people got to buy groceries. I mean, look,
In the
like I guess,
regular world, it might be
yeah.
someone you've actually met. Here, it's like not necessarily, no.
Right, right. So, so the sheen starts to wear off, and I think this happens to a lot of people. And so, there's a part of me that says, "Oh, well, I'm kind of this is it, Los Angeles. I have to be here." And to a large extent, yes, you have to remain in Los Angeles because it's still where things initiate and it's still where things are born in terms of projects. So, but the itch starts, and then what happens is, I'm missing a ton of things here. My mother lives here, like everybody, my sister, my
Yeah.
brother, my cousins, and then like so you go home as often as you can, and for the holidays and parties and over summers, but you're still missing a lot. And so what I would find over the years is whenever I came to South Florida or to Miami, I would always say I'm going home. But then when I would fly back to LA, I would say I'm going back to
To
LA.
LA. I do
And
that.
so that distinction where I would say I'm going home when I was coming here, and then I was I'm going back to LA. It suddenly started to wake me up. And it's like, why don't I call LA home?
You might call
And
your
so
house your apartment home, but
yes,
you
absolutely.
might not always refer to the city that way.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. So anyway, to make a long story short, too late. 30 years in Los Angeles, and so and I think about once I started my second decade there, I started looking for the off ramp, and I started like,
Hmm.
um, how do I get out of here? And I didn't think I could, And there was a point that we sold our house, and it was a perfect opportunity to move, and our daughter had just started a new school that we really loved. I don't know if am I frozen?
Every now and then you come back.
Oh,
Got your back. Don't worry about it.
I've come back. I'm so sorry. I hope you can edit this.
We're all
Um,
used to this by now. At least you're not on mute.
yeah, no, it's yeah, my gosh, sorry. I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi
It
or,
hiccups every
but
now.
but anyhow, we decided to stay. We bought a house in the in West Hills, and we stayed for a long, long time after that. And then COVID hit. And then when COVID hit around that time, my mother got sick. Like almost immediately when COVID hit, my mother got sick.
Yeah.
And it was right during that time that people were saying, hey, you're not going to be able to see your loved ones, or there might be a plexiglass between. And frankly, a lot of the stuff that was going on in LA was very draconian, and I, very sort of,
It was
you
tough.
know, it was
It was
very
tough.
tough. And so yeah, so I had been thinking about it for a long time, and then my mother being sick, and I wanted to be near her. And my family was very used to being down here. And so anyway, we then made the decision as a
I
family,
think
and
that's the point when a lot of people bounced and maybe they
yeah,
thought they'd come back, and it forced everybody online, forced the
yeah,
Zoom meetings and the Zoom conferences. And after a while, a lot of people are like, I can get by on this. I'm not staffed on a TV show where I have to be somewhere, or the way my job runs. Although they're just putting out reports right now. Go, you're a director, you're project based. You go here, you
yeah,
go there, you go here, you go there. Um, the report on the amount of filming that's happening in
mhm.
LA is
I saw that.
at
Yeah.
an historic low. And someone like you can work, someone like an actor maybe can work, or a writer can work. But for all the crews and the
Yeah, below the
caterers,
line.
the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
suppliers and stuff, and it's tough. It's pretty
It's very
apocalyptic
brutal.
right now.
No, Kate, it's really brutal. And I have a lot of friends who are below the line, because over the years you do this long enough, you start making friends with
Mhm.
people on different crews and on different shows. And it is very tough. And by the way, that report is one of the reasons that was those it's a long list of reasons, but I was living in LA, but I wasn't working in LA. Like I was leaving anyway.
You're
So I
always
was on
being
an
sent to
airplane,
some New York, Nashville, Atlanta, whatever,
Vancouver, New
Vancouver. Oh,
Mexico,
constantly Vancouver. I know an actor who
Vancouver.
moved his whole family to Vancouver because for a while, because it's like otherwise
Yeah,
I
we thought
just
about
see
it.
him on weekends.
Yeah. Yeah, we thought about it as well. We're like, it's like maybe Vancouver's the way to go. But like look, it's tough because so many people who are on cruise have families as well, and
Yeah.
have children, and their children have grown and have started families of their own. But the only thing that one can say, because I don't know how this, like, again, I'm no expert in California politics or city politics, or when they're going to increase incentives, or if they are. But the work isn't there, and I know so many people who have just said, I'm going to move to Atlanta, or I'm going to move to Louisiana, or I'm going to move to North Carolina, or to New York. New York actually has better incentives than California.
Yeah.
And so it's tough because it's such a beautiful place, but you can only say the weather's really nice enough times before you start realizing it's not enough.
And it's the
It's not
one
enough.
thing that nobody in government can take credit for. The natural
Yeah,
beauty and the weather, and that's the single two best things. That's why people came here in the first place to make movies.
that's right.
It was for the sunshine, for the landscapes, for the locations. But at some
Yeah, there's
point,
no reason why we should be shooting anything anywhere else.
yeah,
Like,
because
we
you
just
can
be in
double
LA.
got any landscape. The weather's really clement. You have beautiful places to be. You have a lot of infrastructure, all the
Hmm.
studio lots and everything. But after a while, it seems that the balance tipped where the advantages versus the cost versus the incentives in other places.
Yeah.
With Atlanta has vastly worse weather, but now they
Yep.
actually have a lot of infrastructure. Nashville is coming up with a lot of infrastructure. Toronto does. Vancouver does. I mean, Vancouver, it's like Seattle. It rains most of the year,
Yep.
but you work around it. And it shows got that wonderful misty green look because they're in Vancouver. These places stepped up and got aggressive,
Yeah.
and after a while, money talks. Money talks and money gets
100%.
people to walk. Now they're chasing affordability, tax incentives, and things, and the balance has tipped. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure, like you said, I don't know what the government's going to do. I have no idea how they're going to tip that back because the advantages of shooting here are huge, but there's also a lot of cost involved, you know?
And it's a cost that no studio, no business is going to take on, unless you're Todd Phillips and you could demand that Warner Brothers shoot Joker
Yeah.
2 in Los Angeles, unless
Yeah.
it's something like that. But when there's no way, there's from a business standpoint. And by the way, so you're talking about everything in North America right now. What's happening and where the new frontiers are going to be South America and
Mhm.
Europe and the UK. The UK is getting very aggressive with
They're
incentives,
doing well.
and
They
so
moved
is
all of
Spain.
Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, to the UK because they could. And now you have things like the volume, these
Yeah,
artificial sets, LED created sets, to where you can be totally indoors and create an outdoor location, and you don't have to worry about it raining on your head or something because you're indoors.
yeah.
And I think they
I,
built
I,
one. They're building one here. I think they built one in New Mexico or Texas, one
mhm.
of the two. And they're going to pop up. So now you can shoot quote unquote outdoors,
Yeah,
indoors. And we already have had the virtual indoor locations, the virtual buildings.
hmm,
Like if you watch like House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, they have
yeah.
a companion show. The dragon one is called The House the Dragon Built. Dragons Built. I forget what the Game of Thrones one, but they have a 1 hour episode for each 1 hour episode showing you how it was shot.
I gotta
And
watch that.
oh my goodness, it's amazing. It's so worth it for every film. Whether you even like the shows, it doesn't even matter because these are shows that use every trick in the book, every filmmaking trick in the book, costuming, sets, green screen, whatever you want. And it's amazing what you can do, even outdoors, to create things that you don't have to build that just aren't there. And they use practical sets and practical locations too, married with the technology. It's
Yeah.
like it
No,
almost
listen,
doesn't matter where you are except for the money.
100%. And the movie I just finished that I'm gonna be done within a couple of weeks. We did, I think it was 8 full nights in Vancouver, that we just did a night, and we shot them at the beginning of the year. and it was cold and miserable. And I absolutely, and look, I've been shooting in Vancouver for a long, long time, and I've made friends up there,
Yeah.
really
Beautiful
talented
city. Great,
collaborators. It's a
great
beautiful
city.
city.
Little
My
money spent on Granville Island every now and
Yeah,
then.
I think like right now, if you're in Vancouver in like late spring over the summer and in early fall, it's gorgeous. It's
April to
perfect. It's just
October, all about it. Yeah, April
amazing.
to
It's an
October.
amazing, amazing time. Yeah.
Well, what
But like the moment you get
Psych
into
shot for
November,
years up there.
December, yeah,
Yeah, Psych
yeah.
is set in San Diego, I think, or Santa Barbara. And they shot for years in Vancouver with the portable palm trees and in White Rock on the coast.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
I would
Yeah,
see like the flatbed with the palm trees on it. And they got away with it.
yeah. But you can if you're shooting. Yeah, if you shoot over the summer, you can 100% get away with it.
Mhm.
And but believe me, I would love to not stand in the cold, wet nights of Vancouver, which I've done many. I've done that in
Yeah.
Toronto as well.
Yeah.
I would
Ooh,
rather not.
Toronto.
I would rather not. Oh, I shot some nights in Toronto when it was snowing. Oh, it
Man.
was just, you question your entire career. You're like, is this really worth
I went
doing?
once for
You
a
know,
movie for a TV movie shoot up there, and it was October, and I'm like, I'm from the Adirondacks. I know how to dress for October. This is not a problem. I still have like the full length hooded fleece I bought at the hotel because we're out there on the location. I'm wearing everything I brought plus the fleece, and the ground is frozen hard. And I'm
yeah,
like, this is October?
yeah,
This is
yeah.
like December.
This is what I mean. Like it's again, this is no disrespect to my friends and my collaborators up in Vancouver, but
Bless their
there's no
hearts.
reason why we should be shooting nights in Vancouver in January, February. We should be shooting nights in Los Angeles, where it'll still be like
It'll be
crispy and
chilly,
cool.
but it
Yeah,
won't be
but it's not going
negative
to be,
15
but
degrees. I've done that in
yeah,
Toronto too.
yeah. But you're not going to, but like, that's an entirely different conversation about why that happened and how
But
that happened.
they made
You
it worth it. They found ways, all these locations have found ways to make it worth it for people
hmm
to shoot there. Because in the end,
Yeah,
you don't pick Toronto. You might pick Toronto because it doubles for a lot of places, but you're not going to pick it for its incredibly wonderful weather all year.
yeah,
And its beaches and its
yeah. Same with
mountains. Because
Atlanta.
Toronto doesn't
Atlanta,
have
yeah,
those.
yeah,
You pick it for reasons, and these
yeah,
reasons were good enough for people to go there and repeatedly
yeah,
go there.
yeah. It's the same thing with Atlanta. You don't shoot in Atlanta unless there's tax incentives. I mean, that's just the truth. Like,
Yeah.
there's no reason why we should be shooting in Atlanta. I mean, I'm again nothing against Atlanta crews and nothing against the
Well,
city of
Tyler
Atlanta, but
Perry's built some
you know,
infrastructure there, so
yeah,
there is
but it's because
infrastructure
Tyler
there.
Perry is taking advantage of the Georgia
Yes.
incentives. Like that's the only reason. Otherwise, Tyler Perry would not be in Georgia. He would be in
I
Los
guess
Angeles.
he was going to build on new sound stages, I guess, set of sound stages. And he said no because he saw
Mhm.
what can be done with the volumes and with AI. And he's thinking maybe I
Yeah,
don't need to build
sorry.
these additional sound
Yeah.
stages. So who knows what that portends for the future.
Oh, it's good.
He's an
It
Atlanta
is
guy,
absolutely the
so I'm
future.
sure he's happy to be at
Yeah.
home, but even
hmm
so.
Yeah. It's absolutely the future. That's coming. That's coming. I know there's a lot of harumphing and but we're gonna have to deal with it. We're gonna have to deal with it. We're gonna have to figure
You can
out how
never
to
stop it. You
coexist.
might be able to hold it back a
Yeah.
bit, but you can't ever stop
No,
it.
it's
And
coming.
nothing really ever goes
It's
away. I
coming.
mean, movies didn't replace radio completely and TV didn't replace movies completely. Everything just has to shift and change and adapt. I mean,
Yeah.
podcasts have brought really essentially radio and radio drama back. And that's like 100-year-old thing. You never know.
Yeah.
So
That's very, very true.
as a director, as the physical guy on the set going do this and do that, how do you feel about AI and about all the things that it can do that might not require a physical human being standing on a set going, go here and go there?
Well, it's a complicated intricate because, as there's some the filmmaking process is a collaborative process where you're interacting with other humans, and you're relying on their abilities and on their artistic instincts and their expertise and their craftsmanship. And that's all part of the process. That's all part of what makes it great. Um, we are not now, but we are potentially entering a world 10 years, 15 years from now, where a filmmaker can sit at a computer and create a movie on his or her laptop.
Mhm.
Everything. And look, it looks photoreal. You can have music, you can have now the ethical problem with that. It's like what uh Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? Is that old question. The ethical problem is that where is AI finding this material, right? So what's happening
Christine
is
Bateman
AI
had
can't,
something to say about that recently. She goes, it's straight up that. It's
yeah,
straight up.
because like it's not AI is not just pulling it out of thin air because AI is not human. AI is so what's happening is the whole concept of AI is artificial intelligence, which means it has to learn from stuff that we've done. So it's
Mhm.
scraping. So I've done two movies for Lionsgate, and Lionsgate just hired, I forget what company, to basically do a deal where they can have their AI tool learn from all their movies specifically. So Lionsgate is deliberately turning over their entire library, including two of my movies, so that AI can learn how,
Mm.
what was done. So in theory, everything that I did that took me however long it took me to make the movie with the collaborators that I made it with, um, some bastardized version of that could exist in the future that was just sort of regurgitated by AI because it's going to learn everything. It's going to learn composition. It's going to learn emoting from actors. It's going to learn what a push in does. It's going to learn what a zoom does. It's going to learn what certain kinds of lighting. Like right now, I've got a sun behind me, so this is all blown out. AI is going to learn how to do this. They already can do this. AI can do this. So the ethical argument then is that it's you're not really creating a movie from scratch. You're just recreate the AI is just recreating something that's already been made. And then so, but what I believe, and again, this is me being a glass half full kind of guy,
Yeah.
is we've all been kind of derivative anyway prior to
Well,
AI. We
yeah.
we
Hmm.
we all as
Let's
filmmakers
be
are pulling
honest.
from people before
Especially
us.
the since the 1970s when you had the rise of the film school grads.
Correct.
You know, the
So
guys who were raised and educated on other films. And
correct.
so you've seen that more and more.
Yeah.
This looks like a scene from that, and this looks like a scene from that. You know,
Correct.
that's his influence, that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's be honest.
So that's been happening. They sometimes will straight up call it an homage and they'll just rip off a shot or a sequence or a series of shots, or they'll
Like the
just,
remake of Psycho, Gus Van Sant Psycho, which was
yeah,
shot
well,
through
that was a
Alfred
straight up
Hitchcock.
shot for shot remake. But like what I'm talking about is like is filmmakers are literally remembering, whether consciously or unconsciously, movies that made them happy, and they're in some fashion, myself included. I'm sure I'm just as guilty. When they go to do their own work, they apply again, consciously or unconsciously, everything that they've seen over the years, and they're putting it into their own work. So,
So the
so
argument could
very,
be, what are we but flesh and blood large language models?
that's what I'm trying to get at. So
You know?
I think so. Here's the positive to this. Here's a silver lining. Me being the eternal optimist, I think AI and the advent of AI, which is basically going to start doing what we're doing to ourselves anyway. AI is going to compel us to be more original and creative because what are
Mhm.
the things that we could do? So maybe don't buy into that first idea. Maybe don't just when you get a script as a director and you see it and you go, oh my God, this reminds me of that movie. I'm just going to recreate that thing and do my own version of it. As opposed to doing that, maybe what this challenges us to do is well, let's find a brand new way that's fresh and
Mhm.
innovative and clever that hasn't been done before. And that's the challenge. And maybe what AI is going to do is launch an entirely new way of looking at story and an entirely new way of because we have to compete with AI the same way that television was
Uh-huh.
competing with movies. So I think this might get Hollywood out of the sort of creative rut that it's in. And again, I've been part of this machine for the last 30 plus years. And I'm sure that if you look at things that I've done, you could probably spot things that I've mostly unconsciously, but
Yeah.
in some cases consciously pulled from somewhere, and I just recreated it. And again, it's not exactly apples to apples, but it's essentially what's happening with AI is AI is not recreating ET going, and Elliot going across the moon, but that concept of a, long lens on a moon and a figure going across, AI can create something in a
Oh yeah.
different context, just the same way that I can. I could do my ET homage, and then someone's like, well, it's not the exact shot, guys. I did something slightly different. Well, maybe we got to get to a point where we stop doing that. And we
Yeah.
get to a point where we're no longer interesting, or we're no longer interested in homaging or in, tipping our hat to it or recalling something or borrowing. Maybe what this does is it's going to compel us to think more freely and think differently, because that's the one thing that AI can't do yet. Who knows in the future? But right now, AI can't come up with new ideas. AI can only take what's been made and recreate it in some fashion.
What other thing I was thinking about is I just read Sidney Lumet. I read had read to me by Bob Evans, Bob Evans's memoir, which is amazing, read by Bob Evans.
Yeah.
And then I listened to the audiobook of Sidney Lumet's memoir. And then I was just thinking about, and it's all about the ways that a director or a producer pivots because something happens in the outside world. Some
Mhm.
circumstance forces them to adapt to a thing. And I was thinking about like one little example from Die Hard, which if you watch it, plays out like the most perfect, you know, plotted out, seamless action film. And action films have to be tight and seamless like that. Except I don't think they knew. They said in this documentary I watched, they didn't know until Alan Rickman was on set, almost like that day, that Alan Rickman could do an American accent. So they're like,
Mhm.
make a quick pivot. Oh, let's change this or that so that when John McClane meets Hans upstairs in the building, Hans pretends to be an executive, an American guy named Bill
Yeah, Bill
Clay.
Clay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they didn't know ahead of time that Alan Rickman could do that. So that was a
Yeah.
fast pivot that wound up being a great scene in the movie. The one thing AI can't invent is those circumstances in the outside world. The weather, the
Yeah.
time, actor gets the flu, Alan Rickman can do an American accent, whatever the heck it is that causes things to change in something that's being filmed. And then it winds up like, oh, that was genius. Well, it was genius improvisation in the moment. It wasn't
Yeah.
planned ahead of time. It wasn't based on anything. It's just a smart director, writer, actor, whatever it is, adapting in the moment. And you
Yeah.
lose the serendipity, the happy accidents that then become enshrined in movie history. And if you look back, you go, yeah, they made that up on the day in the
Yeah.
moment, you know. You
Yeah.
lose
Well,
you lose
but
that
here's
freshness
the
and that surprise.
yeah. But again, the argument can then be made also, like in those moments where things are happening and they're pivoting. Where's that idea for, again, I don't know, I wasn't there, but the idea for to do the American accent and to be Bill Clay, did that come from uh, an idea that they pulled from the ethers, or did that come from did John McTiernan remember some movie from
Remember
the 40s
something, or did
that he's, you know what I
somebody
mean?
on
Like,
set suggest something? Did they call the writer, and the writers, they probably didn't call the writer because they would never do that, but they might have called the writer and said, we just discovered this, what do you think, can you whip up something? Who knows how
yeah,
that was put together? But those happy accidents that make these fresh, fun moments and things that might not have
100%.
existed
100%.
otherwise.
Yeah, but I think again, what's intriguing about the AI situation, and again, there's it's intriguing, but again, if you put aside the ethical part of it, that it's clearly scraping and taking from past things, where it could get specific for a filmmaker who will stop being a filmmaker and they mostly become prompters, is what they're going to become, because you're just prompting the machine. If you, Kate, can figure out how to prompt the machine in a way that I can't. So in other words, it stands to reason that you as a writer could perhaps write the prompt in a way that would make AI deliver a prettier picture.
Yeah.
There's something. So where the specificity, because I think what will ultimately happen is like AI is going to become its own medium, where people will be like, okay, this is an AI made movie, but then you're going to go,
Like the difference between animation and live action.
correct, correct.
Choices in animated movies in terms of the visuals are completely different than choices in live action.
But what will happen is someone will say like, oh, this is a Kate O'Hare one. Oh, well, she does interesting ones. And so now you might have an
Possibly.
audience because of the specific way that you prompt AI that is different than the way that I would do it. And that's sort of where the specificity of it and the human aspect, because there still has to be a person for now, writing the prompts. I think the slippery slope is, who knows in 30, like right now, like who would have told us 30 years ago when I first moved to Los Angeles that we'd be having this conversation about AI. I think I don't even think I had ever uttered the words artificial intelligence 35 years ago. Like, maybe like I
Well, we would
saw
have
it in
gone
some
Hal
movie or,
from
you know,
2001 would have been Hal.
yeah, for 2000. Yeah, exactly. But it was like Kubrick, 2001. That's so far away. That's
I
like hundreds
know.
of years away, and it's in our lifetime. So,
Yeah.
so who knows in 30 years if machines will be able to conceive their own things and come up with their own things? Who knows? Like who knows where it's going? It's all I know is that we have to accept that it's coming, and we have to be we have to be sort of Johnny on the spot and just kind of say like, either we're going with it or I'm going to retire and just be done and just see what happens. Like those are the two options.
Things change. Like I was standing on a set one day and somebody was saying, check the gate, which is where in a film camera you check to make sure there's no dirt or hair or something in front of
Right.
the lens. And I was thinking, now we're getting into digital. This was the beginning of digital filmmaking. And nobody's going to say check the gate anymore because there's no gate
Yeah.
as such. No, this is digitally recording rather than a physical camera exposing a piece of film. So
Yeah.
things that was what, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. So things are always
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
We
By the
went
way,
from
we still stay
talkies,
rolling.
we
We
went
still,
from
yeah.
silent to talkie, from black and white to
Yeah.
color, from square to cinemascope to technicolor, whatever. On the first special effects,
Yeah.
you look at how the effects in Star Wars were made. It's like the dinosaur era. Or you look at the
Yeah.
first
It was
dinosaurs
all photochemical. It was all
compared to now.
photochemical in those days, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's something I want to ask about, since I write primarily for the faith audience and you're a Catholic guy. Where does in the life of a working professional who's not working in the faith-based sphere necessarily, but is working in the mainstream, where does sort of ethics come into it for you? Where, like, you don't have to tell me like the specifics, but where in your thought process of taking on a job or saying no to a job or whatever, do those sort of considerations come in of the content, of the audience, of how it sits with me personally? How's that work for you?
There have been one or two shows in my career that I've said no to, because um, there. I'm not going to mention the names, but like there was one show that I just thought was really an ugly, violent show. And I don't have problems with, I've done violent things. I've done action stuff with tons of violence where people get maimed and killed and shot. Like I've done those things.
Yeah.
But this particular show was one that was really ugly. And again, I'm not a fuddy-duddy, and I'm not, I'm not a square, as they say. But like I was even like, I don't know if I wanted, because it's, if I'm doing
I
one
could name a
episode
couple
of the
shows that
show,
were over the line.
yeah, yeah, it's but you're talking about when it's one episode of television, you're talking about committing, 21 days of your life, and just for an episode of television. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, like for 21 days, not counting post, you're sort of immersed in this world.
Yeah.
So, so there have been a couple of times that I've said, no, I haven't told them exactly why. Like I would just say I'm not available, because like the best thing to do when you don't like something or you don't like the material or whatever, you just go, I'm not available. And everyone sort of gets it. And by the way, sometimes you're legitimately not available.
Not
And like
available.
there's been
Yeah.
times that I've had to turn things down because I was legitimately not available. And that's heartbreaking, especially when you do want to do it. But there have been a couple of times that I've said no, and I don't know, actually, I don't know what my agent said. I just said no to them, and then they said whatever. I think I told them, well, just tell them I'm not available, and they're like, we got it. I don't know what agents say to people. So, but yes, there have been times that I have worked on shows that I've had to do scenes or work on shows entirely that I thought were reprehensible, frankly. Like there were things that I did that I was like, eh, I didn't have to do that. I
How do
didn't
you
have
feel
to.
about that afterward? Like, does that stick with you, or how does that work?
Here's how it works for me. Um, as a Catholic, I have a family to feed, and that's my first priority.
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at what I do as a job, so you look at it, let's just say a plumber, all right? We clog our toilet and it overflows and it's disgusting. We're going to call a plumber. That guy's going to show up and he's going to see the worst that we've just, in the
Yeah.
toilet.
Yeah.
And that poor guy has to get in there.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sure that dude stands there for a moment and he's like, oh my God, what am I looking
Wouldn't
at?
this just
And
be a leaky faucet?
but my point is that he's
Yeah.
got to get in there and he's got to be the one to unclog it, and he's seeing the worst of like,
Yeah.
and that person is probably going, um, I have to do this. My family's depending on me. I have to pay my mortgage, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to unclog this toilet, and I'm going to wear gloves, and I'm going to smell some stuff that I don't want to smell, but I'm going to do it, and this is my job, and I'm going to go home. And that's how I look at it. I don't see myself as an artist. I see myself as a craftsman. And I think that that distinction, that sort, no, by the way, I know that I make art, and I know that there's artistry in what I do. And there are times that I seek out cinematic art and I know that I'm doing something that's cinematic and artful, 100%. But I don't look at my job as I am an artist and I have an ascot and a pipe, like I don't do that stuff. I look at it as, um, I have a job to do. I'm given a script. I have to interpret the script. I have to tell this story using my own instincts, my craftsmanship, my abilities, and tell that story. And so when I say yes to an episode of television, and I don't know what the script is until I get it. And when I get the script, sometimes I'm going,
Yeah.
ooh,
TV director, that's a different deal than a movie
you don't
director.
know until like 2 or 3 days before you start the actual. You've said yes like
Nobody
months,
knows.
yeah, months ago. I said yes
Not
two
a
months
living
ago, and now
soul knows.
yeah.
And on some
So
shows,
you get
even on the day,
yeah.
they still don't know.
Yeah, oh, 100%. That also happens. That's happened to me for sure. So, it's certainly happened where I've opened the script and I've said, oh wow, okay, I'm doing this. Okay, well, this is happening. And so you have to weirdly compartmentalize and say, I am coming in, I'm doing a job, I'm unclogging a toilet. That's what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. And I do. And I go in and I say, I'm telling the story. And even though I may not uh, connect on a personal level with what's happening here, that's not my job. My job is to tell this story and to tell it to the best of my abilities.
Point the
And then
camera, make your day.
and make the day and there so what it's a weird thing, Kate, because suddenly I find myself immersed in that particular storyline or moment or scene or whatever, and I'm just as engaged. So, and I have to be fully committed to the story I'm telling. And then when I'm done, those are the episodes that I don't watch again. I just kind of
Well,
like
you
I
did an
file those
episode.
away,
Yeah,
you know.
we're not gonna look at that. You did an episode of Evil, which is a CBS, well, Paramount Plus show. Was CBS for a season.
That show I love doing, by the way.
Yeah, because
That show
that's
I
a
love doing.
Catholic themed show. It's all about, exorcism, which who doesn't love a good exorcism story?
Mhm.
So when you got to do something that was in your milieu like that, how much fun was that?
Well, I think it makes a world of difference. I think for the longest time I've done shows that I wasn't the core audience for. So, like for instance, I did a lot of things in Spanish television, right? I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish, but I don't watch Spanish television. Like I mean,
From where does the Spanish speaking part of your family originate?
my parents are both Cuban.
Okay.
I was born in New York City, but raised in Miami.
Yeah.
So we spoke Spanish. My parents spoke to me in Spanish, but my sister and I and my brother would respond in English. So this was our house,
Very common
they would
immigrant
they would
story.
yeah, they would speak to us in Spanish and we would answer in English. And then all my friends, we all spoke English and that's how life was. So I don't watch Spanish television. I will for specific reasons, but I don't, it's not like me. I sit down, I go outside and I'm like, I'm gonna watch some TV and I put on Univision. Like I just don't do it.
Yeah.
So I did a number of things in Spanish television that I worked very hard on and I took very seriously, but I wasn't the core audience. Same thing when I do stuff in the family space. I love the family space. I really do enjoy doing shows for the family. But when I've done shows, but there's a difference between shows for family and shows for kids. And I've done
Yes,
shows for kids.
it's a whole
I
different
did
thing.
shows,
Like
yeah, I
Little
did
House
shows
on
for
the
Disney.
Prairie might be for the family,
Correct.
but if it's on Nickelodeon, it's for kids.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because like I did a show for Disney Junior called Imagination Movers, which was for the preschool audience.
Oh
I
my,
am not
that's
I
really
am
for
not
kids.
preschool. I'm not preschool at all, obviously. But I took that show as seriously as I did Evil. But I wasn't the core audience. The
Yeah.
difference is when I went on to Evil, and I started doing shows like Evil, like Star Trek and things like that, I started realizing, oh wow, I would watch this show even if I hadn't worked on it. And
Yeah.
it just makes a world of
So much
difference to be
fun.
like, I'm a fan of the show. I'm a fan of the
Well, like,
show because I was watching
yeah.
Evil.
As a
Like I
TV
did see.
journalist, I had to watch uncounted thousands of hours of things that I would never have watched otherwise.
Mhm.
And now that I have some luxury to pick and choose, I'm like, I would watch this even if I technically didn't have to watch it. I would still watch
Yeah.
it. And whenever
Yeah.
you have to watch something as a duty, it's completely different.
100%, 100%. There have been people were always stunned in my industry because the first thing that people will ask is, oh, what are you watching? Like everyone's always curious about what's on your watch
Yeah,
list.
yeah, yeah.
And I always tell people I don't really watch a lot of stuff unless I hear from someone, oh, you should see this. Like I tend to watch old movies and old TV shows. My comfort, my choice when I sit down is okay, like it's not like I don't watch new stuff, but I'm not seeking out new shows. I'm not
Yeah.
looking through Netflix and like, oh, that's a new show. Let me start that. For me, it's like I've got to hear a recommendation from people that I trust, and someone's go, no, no, you got to, like for me, for instance, Game of Thrones. I didn't jump on the Game of Thrones until like season 3 or something like that. The Sopranos, the same thing. Like I'm a late adopter on shows. Like I'm just like I'm like it's until I hear no, really, it's really well done. It's really well crafted, really well. And then I'll watch it. Then I'm like, oh my, I can't believe I have not been watching this show. And then I feel like an idiot because I'm like, this is so good. So that's happened where I've like Breaking Bad was another one that I just didn't start. I just was like, eh. And then I was like, show about a guy with, it's like a drug show,
Yeah,
meth addict, meth. And I was like, I'm not watching
meth
some show
dealer.
about a meth dealer. I'm not going to do that. And then people were like, trust me, it's really good. I'm like, fine, I'll
I
watch
still
it. And then
haven't
I was like,
watched. I had the exact same conversations with people, and I still haven't watched it.
it really, if like, listen, there
There's
are
too much
some
TV
really
water under the
hard,
bridge since then. There's too many other things. I have to rewatch
yeah,
Clarkson's Farm. Come on.
yeah, it's hard to watch. There's times, there's scenes
Mm,
that you're like, whoa, but totally worth it. It's so well done. It's very violent. It's very violent. So so it's not might not be for everybody, look, but to answer your question, it's like it's being able to do things that you love seeing makes a world of difference in the craftsmanship because then you're not only because I was saying earlier, when I'm doing a show that I find objectionable, I have to put on my professional hat and figure out like, this is my job. I'm not here to judge the show. I'm here to deliver
yeah.
this as best as I can. That's the same no matter what the show is, whether I'm doing a preschool show or a Spanish language show or a show that I find reprehensible or this but when I go do a show that I love, like Picard or Evil or Snowpiercer or From Dusk Till Dawn, those shows where I'm like, ooh, I love this. It makes a world because now I'm not just putting on my professional hat, but I am coming in as a fan. And so for me, it's exciting to be like, oh my God, I'm part of this show that I'm contributing a small part to the show. And it's just like, and you're more deeply invested, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it really has been a difference. Like I think in the last 12, 13 years, um, I've been doing things that I would watch even if I hadn't worked on it. And it's so delightful to be able to do that. And I'm at a point in my career where I am saying, like, there are things that
You get a luck. You
if
get to a
something
certain
else,
point, you get a little luxury where you get to say yes or no.
yeah. And if something comes my way tomorrow, I'll say no. And I don't have to give anyone an excuse why. I was saying the other day that there are two words that you could say and they're very powerful, and you owe nobody an explanation, which is not interested. That's it.
I was
That's
set up to
here.
watch a movie last night that I was in two minds about whether I should even give it any attention. And I thought about it long and hard. And finally I said, I read enough about this movie. I know what the denouement is. I know what that's 2 hours of my life I'm not going to get back. Plus having to write about it, that's another 2 hours of my life I'm not going to get back. And I'm like, yeah, it ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. I'm not doing it. About
Yeah.
out.
Well, and I think that's also not a luxury, but that's a certainly an indicator as we get older that at least for me, I just don't have the patience to
Yeah.
like there's this weird thing in town where there's sort of this like elitist kind of like this is a show you should be watching because it's we have deemed it worthy of watching like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, like independent film
Oh yeah.
was was just blanket
Oh, wonderful.
superior. Yeah, it's superior to commercial filmmaking. It's superior to mainstream Hollywood movies. And so, which I didn't agree with. I'm like, I've seen plenty of indie movies that are terrible. But I remember that I saw this movie. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but um,
It'll come to you when you don't think
gosh,
about it.
yeah. Anyway, oh my gosh. Anyway, it was I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was like as I was watching it, and I was watching it with my wife, and I kept saying, and I kept predicting what was going to happen, and I was like, okay, and
I
yeah,
do
she got
that.
abused. She got abused by her father, And it was like, by the way, an independent movie, gritty movie. And I was like, okay, and now she has AIDS. Like I'm going through the thing, and then like that's what would happen. And then my wife said, "Did you see this movie?" And I said, "No. All I'm doing as an exercise is I'm thinking about what I would do, what the commercial thing would be, and then what's the opposite of this? Because that's clearly what the filmmakers did. They
Yeah.
looked at the movie, they looked at a story, and they're like, what's really satisfying and accessible? Okay, let's do the opposite." And that's all they did. And that's the formula. Let's just go opposite of commercial. And now we're art. And now we're, and I was just like,
Yeah,
no, this
well,
is just unsatisfying and bleak. Like, and I want to take a shower. I think this is terrible. So I don't like that kind of stuff. So I tend to not watch that kind of stuff. I tend to like steer clear. Now,
I like
that being said,
2.5 hour, 3 hour, really good action movies. I paid twice to see Top Gun Maverick, and I hate to pay for it.
sure.
I
Yeah,
also
but
paid twice to see Oppenheimer. I love a
yeah,
giant historic costume drama thingy too.
yeah. Yeah, but
Like,
but neither of those movies was bleak. I
no, I
think I
don't I
think
don't do bleak. Like I live in LA.
yeah,
I don't need bleak. I
yeah,
got I got
eh,
that. But speaking
yeah,
to a TV director, I have to say, having seen far more TV than anyone should. And I know that TV directors are not given the leeway and the respect that a lot of feature film directors might be given on a project. Point the camera, make your day, don't make trouble. The train is moving. Where the camera will shift to the window. I'm like, oh, there's someone outside the window. Shift to the door. Oh, someone's coming in that door. Oh, someone's behind the bed. Because you can read the camera angles. Because
mhm,
a lot of times you just don't have the time or the opportunity to be artistic.
mhm, mhm.
My
Yeah,
favorite moment, though, my favorite moment in any show was an episode of um, CSI New York
mhm,
with Gary Sinise. And it was an episode in
mhm.
which David Caruso and his character from CSI Miami was guest starring. So Gary Sinise is standing in a room in New York City, and it's blue and gray and very CSI New York looking, all sort of blue and shadowy and things. The door is open, and suddenly there stands Horatio Caine in a fabulous golden glow. Danny Cannon directed that. I near fell over. I thought that was the most hilarious thing. Like he brought Miami with him. This golden globe. Like,
Danny Cannon's a good
I love
director. I
you,
like Danny
Danny
Cannon.
Cannon. That's
Yeah, yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. Danny Cannon's a good director. But like,
Yes.
that surely was like, look, I'm sure what Danny was doing is what we all do in television, which is, you're right. We have somewhere between 8 and 10 days to make these episodes,
Yeah.
and yeah, you have to sort of stay on schedule, stay on budget, finish, make your day, move on. Next director comes in right behind you. That's 100% the culture. But any director worth his or her salt is looking for ways of adding nuance and adding stuff that will elevate the episode. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
job. Like once you sort
I
of are,
remember that to this day because it
yeah,
was just such a delightful little touch that he could have gotten away without, but
yeah.
it
Well, I
added
mean,
so much.
but I think that's the key. That's the key to it. And I think that your job as a TV director is not to come in and give your vision. Your job is servicing the showrunner's
Nobody
vision.
wants your fish.
No, well, the only vision that we want is the showrunners, right?
Yeah.
So when you get hired onto a TV show, the writer's the boss. So my first job on day one is to USB connect into the brain of the showrunner and download all that he or she wants. And and I have to, within the first few days of prep, really have an understanding of what they want. And I've been on shows where I started shooting and I was still unclear because some showrunners are just they don't have clarity. They don't know what they want sometimes, and sometimes it's like, okay, I think I got it. But for the most part, most showrunners are pretty clear, and they want you to, you know, make sure your episode looks like the one before and the one
Yep.
that's coming after.
Yep.
But, they give you the confines and you go, here's your, I'm in this square right now. And so once I know these are the the parameters, these are the borders or the frame lines. Now I can do within this frame anything I want because I'm staying within the lines. I'm not coloring outside the lines.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the way that I approach it. And so I try to have my episodes, again, whether it's an episode of television that I love doing, or whether it's I get a script that I don't like, but I have to do it. No matter what it is, I'm trying to elevate that episode so that, I'm a competitive guy. I've played sports. I want to win. I want to
Yeah.
beat the other directors. I want to be better. I want mine to stand out, even if I don't have the best script, even if mine is like the middle of the season episode that no one cares about, because the episodes that always matter are the ones
Or
at the
the
beginning of
bottle show.
the season. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
I've gotten
we're out of
bottle
money,
episodes.
so we have to just shoot everything in the basement
I've done
or
those.
the elevator
I've
or the
got one or two of
warehouse.
those episodes. Oh yeah, yeah. And sometimes I've had episodes where you're like, can you shoot this in 7 way? Because if they call you and they tell you, hey Joe, we're going to give you the 7 day episode. I'm like, wait a minute, aren't you an 8 day episode or aren't you an 8 day show? Yeah, but we're screwed. We've
We
spent
blew
too much
all our
money.
money on the two-part sweeps episode. Oh
Yeah,
well.
no. So then what they do is they want to hire the director they could trust
Yeah.
that can bring it in 7 days. So in a weird way, it's a compliment. It's sort of like, we need you to do your thing and do it in 7 days. And then what I always say is like, happy to do it, but there are going to be things you're going to have to let me do. Because if you really want it in 7 days, I can't do it the way, like I'm going to shoot, maybe not as much coverage,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna walk away from take two as opposed to doing 4 or 5 takes. Like there are things that we got to do um, to
And you got to understand that.
to do it. And so when they hire you to do those, it's a compliment, but it's also an extension of trust because they know, okay, we know you can do it. I've got a bag of tricks that I can revert to that I can do it, but I've done those and I've done the episodes where I get more days where I've had 12-day episodes and it's like a little
Yes.
mini movie, I've done those as well. So it all depends. It all depends. Um, but there's ways of doing things. Like I've done a lot of things in television that you would think you wouldn't be able to do, but there's some things that I'm very artistically proud of. And it's all in television. It's not movies. Like I'm
Yeah.
doing a movie right now, and there's no back row in movies. In TV, there's a back
It's
row.
you and you
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
So
maybe
like
the
right now,
producer.
like even as I'm talking to you, my phone is buzzing and I'm getting emails because they're like, why isn't Joe
Make a
entering? I'm like, I'm
decision.
on a Zoom with Kate O'Hare.
I remember like one of my favorite things was a documentary I saw years ago on PBS where Homicide, Life on the Street was doing an
Mhm.
episode. And they brought in an indie film director. It was an episode where a guy gets caught between a subway train and the edge, and he's
Yeah,
only going to live until they have to move the subway train, and then he will bleed
right.
out and he will die. So it was a great script, but they brought in an indie film director, and they followed him around as he just did all of his indie film director things, you know, and then he hands off his cut to the producers, which they hacked to living bits
Yeah.
because they were just really not that interested in all of the little touches he brought. And I felt bad for the guy, but I'm like, everybody who decides they want to direct television should watch. This is the worst case scenario where you
Yeah.
think they want me to bring me. No, they want you to bring Homicide, Life on the Street.
That's correct.
And anything
That's
you
right.
bring that is not Homicide, Life on the Street is going to get cut or
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah. And you have
And
to
it's
know
like a
going in
little
that's going to
education
happen.
that you have to put your ego aside and
Hmm.
service the project ahead
Yeah.
of servicing your vision.
That's 100% right. And the moment you figure that out and you don't try to fight the system, you don't try to outsmart it, you don't try to outwit it, you don't try to, like game it. You just go in going, these are the rules. And, I know what I stay in my lane. I know exactly what you need from me once I've downloaded from the showrunner. And then I'm like, got it. And I go off and I want to, like, for me, I'm not even servicing the audience in television. For me, it's the showrunner and the
Mm-hmm.
studio and the network. Like those are the three entities that as a TV director,
It's
I'm
their
I'm
job to
interested
worry
in.
about the audience, not yours.
100%. If they've handed me a script, the showrunner, the studio, and the network, that means that they vetted it.
Mhm.
They've gone through a number of drafts, they've gone through outlines, they've gone through premises, and they've arrived here, they've handed me a script. So I'm like, you guys have all done your job. Now it's my turn. So it's not my job to like, how can I really let me excuse me while I show you TV people what kind of an artist I am. No, no, my
Exactly.
job is to like now take the thing that you've been working on for however long and now deliver it. And then are you happy? Then I'm happy. And that's it.
Well, I could just talk to you for hours, but I think you need to get back to being a film director.
I'm in post on a movie that's going to be on Paramount Plus and in
Can
January.
you tell us the name of it?
Yeah, it's called Henry Danger, the movie,
Oh, how
and
fun.
it's based on a Nickelodeon IP. From it's a show. It was a sitcom that was on, and it did 4 or 5 seasons. Very successful, very popular. It still runs on Nickelodeon. It still
Yeah.
runs on Paramount Plus, and so they've been wanting to make a movie version of this for a long time. And initially, when they called me for it, I didn't want to do it. I said to my agents like, "Oh, I'm not doing like a kid sitcom. I'm not doing that." They're like, no, no, no. They want to make a movie out of it. And so I then pitched my take as an elevated superhero movie. Now, there's a lot of humor. There's a lot
Yep.
of the show had some very broad elements. It was finding so like I used Guardians of the Galaxy kind of as a model, kind of
Yep.
like that tone where they can, it's like you do the epic superhero thing, but then you could do the fun, broad kind of humor as well. And you got to
Yep.
find that blend.